name is Marianne Lippa. I am one of the career advisors on the graduate student and postdoc team in Career Services. And we're going to talk about what are some helpful questions to ask when you're networking. So this brings us to the different categories and themes of questions that you may consider asking when you have an informational interview. And so the different categories that really kind of focus on networking, or at least, are the more commonly asked areas would be, those that center around, well, how can I best prepare for a career in this field? So understanding what you can do to help prepare for a career in that particular career field, gaining insight into what it's like to work for a specific company or organization. So certainly asking questions that center around that topic. Asking the contact with whom you're speaking about their present role and position. You can also ask them if you'd like to know more about what their career future and professional path might look like, or what they might, be planning moving forward. You can also ask them what their own prior experience and preparation has been for something in that career field and in that specific position that they currently hold. You can also ask questions about lifestyle and work-life balance. And then lastly, perhaps you would like to end it with asking if there's anyone else that they would like you to, if they know of anyone that you would be able to potentially connect with and speak with, and if they would be able to facilitate that introduction. So thinking about the first category, about how to help prepare for a career in that particular field, some of the questions that you may be interested in asking, and again, we have lots of questions in our guide that I will be sharing the resource link with you. And unfortunately, you won't necessarily have time to ask every single question that's provided in there, but these are some of the more commonly asked questions. And I think it's important to just think about, well, what are some of the different topics that arise in an informational interview? So thinking about the preparation for the career field, one of the things you may want to know about is, okay, well, what educational preparation do they believe would be best for working in this industry? Is there a particular degree or focus within the degree that would set somebody up best for a role in that career field, in that industry? You might also be curious about what are the skills, talents, and personal qualities that would be most utilized and essential for success in that job. You may also ask them, are there any experiences that they would recommend you have, whether that be paid or unpaid or volunteer? You might also be curious about what are some of the changes that are happening in that career field. So in other words, is it growing? Is it changing? You may want to talk about what are some of the typical opportunities that are available for graduate students when they come out of their program. Is there something about those roles that you'd like to learn more about? Do they have some insight on those? Are there any organizations or professional journals that might be helpful for you to review and learn more about that field? So again, there's lots of questions that you might think about asking, and you may want to prioritize which ones are important to you as you go forward with your career exploration and have these informational interviews. So then the next, I would say, category that we want to focus on is, learning what it's like to work at a particular organization or company. So you may want to ask the individual why they decided to work for this organization. What was it about the company or organization that really appealed to them? What do they enjoy the most? What do they perhaps maybe like the least about it? I think that that's really important to kind of, talk about what are the things they like the most, and maybe also what is it that they see are some challenges or some things that maybe are not as enjoyable. You can also, if you're interested in learning more about the organizational culture, that's certainly a question you can ask as well. If professional development is important to you, or ongoing training and education, that's something that you could also ask if their particular employer is willing to support that. So there's, many different kind of specific nuances that you can learn about these particular companies. You might also consider asking them, how do they distinguish themselves from other organizations or competitors that are doing similar work? And lastly, if you have some curiosity and you'd like to know more about what the hiring managers at their company look for on resumes or on your cover letter or in an interview, certainly you may be wanting to ask that question. So then moving on to the individual's current job, their present role, you can also certainly ask them why they chose this career field. What was it that they found really interesting and exciting about that's why they decided to pursue a position in this field. You could, if you're interested in knowing what their typical work week looks like, that's another question that you may consider asking. It can give you insight into, okay, are the responsibilities pretty consistent every day, or are there some, differences, things that kind of keep things not as kind of routine, but more, as things arise. That's sometimes important for an individual to know as they think about different career fields and different positions. You might be curious in asking them, what's the most rewarding aspect about the work they do, right? So what do they find fulfilling? What do they find impactful? What are they most interested in doing when they have their position? So all of these are really, more getting at what is it that they're doing in their role, in their day-to-day tasks, or kind of bigger picture tasks that you might find interesting as well as you are considering this as a potential career path. I think it's also perhaps helpful to understand, what are some of the problems or challenges that have arisen and that they've had to deal with those, or what are some of the challenges overall in that career field, right? So it's kind of not only on the macro perspective, but also on their own kind of position and their responsibilities and the scope of their role. Some additional sample questions that you might consider is, asking the individual, where do they see themselves kind of moving forward, right? So kind of the future path, the future next step. So, how has the work evolved or changed since they started at the organization? How do they see their own path moving forward? If things continue to go and develop as the way they would like, what does career progression look like for somebody at this organization? That's another really insightful question that I think can be helpful as you're considering many, many different options and career fields as you explore. Another category that I think is useful for students and postdocs to think about would be, what is the individual's prior experience and what was their own preparation for this career field and for this position? So I think, certainly asking them, how did they best prepare for this? What was their own program of study? How did they make that transition from academia to industry, right? Or to this particular organization? And I think it's also certainly insightful to learn, kind of in reflection and in retrospect, is there anything that they would have done differently in terms of their preparation for this position or career? So kind of any helpful insight that they might be able to share with you as it relates to, looking back, was there anything that they maybe wish they had kind of done slightly differently to help prepare them better for this career field and this position? I think, if you're certainly interested in learning more about kind of the work-life balance at that organization, that's a great question to ask as well. Is there a culture that's supported in terms of work-life balance? Are there any areas that they really, make a concerted effort to help their employees, enjoy coming to work? Are there any perks or benefits that they have on site? So that's something to think about as well. Is there any flexibility in terms of the attire for work, in terms of dress, the hours, vacation? Is there remote work? Is it a hybrid schedule? So all of those questions I think are certainly great ones to consider asking as well. And then lastly, towards the end of the conversation, I think, it's always nice to kind of end it by asking, well, after having this conversation, might there be anyone else you believe I could talk with or should talk with? And if so, would they be willing to, facilitate that introduction so that you can then reach out to that other individual?